The expensive perfume lingered in the air long after the elegant woman had left Sloane Ridley's office. Sloane sat frozen behind her desk, her manicured fingers still gripping the edge, as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling into an abyss. The green mug of French tea, a thoughtful gift from her new client, sat untouched, its aromatic steam curling upward like a question mark. "I need to discover if he's committed," the woman had said in her gentle French accent, sliding the photograph across the mahogany desk. "He's wonderful, but so mysterious." The moment Sloane looked down at the glossy image, she felt as if someone had sucked all the air from the room. The handsome face, smiling back at her, belonged to Thatcher Wade, her husband of 6 years. Sloane was known throughout Seattle as the best infidelity detective in the business. For almost a decade, she had built her reputation on an uncanny ability to catch cheating spouses. Her sharp, blue-green eyes missing nothing, her analytical mind connecting dots that others overlooked. Yet somehow, she had missed what was happening under her own roof. "I met him at a real estate conference last month," Delphine Moreau had explained, her slender fingers nervously adjusting her silk scarf. "He presented himself as a successful international property investor. We've been seeing each other for several weeks now." Sloane had maintained her professional demeanor with a composure that surprised even herself. Years of undercover work had taught her how to hide her emotions, how to keep her face neutral when her heart was racing. That training had never been more valuable than in this moment. "He's charming, attentive, and so sophisticated," Delphine continued, unaware of the bomb she had just dropped in Sloane's life. "But sometimes he disappears for days. He cancels plans at the last minute with vague excuses about business trips. And despite all his attention and sweet words, he has never tried to kiss me or initiate any physical contact. He says he wants to wait for the right moment." She looked down, a slight blush coloring her elegant features. "At my age, 56 years old, I find that both refreshing and suspicious. A man this wonderful, still single? I think he might be married." The irony was not lost on Sloane. For years, she had harbored suspicions about Thatcher's business ventures. The unexplained income, the late-night calls, the overseas trips that seemed to yield little in terms of concrete results. But she had chosen the comfort of willful ignorance, enjoying the luxurious lifestyle his work provided, without asking too many questions. "My standard fee is $15,000 for a complete investigation," Sloane heard herself say, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her. "It includes surveillance, background checks, and—" "I understand it normally costs more," Delphine interrupted, opening her designer handbag. "But I know you're the best. I'm willing to pay $50,000 to discover if he's committed." The casualness with which the French woman mentioned such an astronomical sum reflected the multi-million-dollar real estate empire she had built across 2 continents. To her, $50,000 was pocket change. To Sloane, it represented a chance at freedom she hadn't known she needed until this very moment. "That won't be necessary, Ms. Moreau," Sloane replied, even as her mind whirled with possibilities. "My standard fee will cover everything." "Please, call me Delphine," the woman insisted with a warm smile that reached her eyes. Kind eyes that had seen success, but had somehow retained a genuine goodness rarely found in people of her position. "And I insist on the $50,000. I value thoroughness, especially in matters of the heart." After Delphine left, Sloane remained motionless for what seemed like hours. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across her office as the reality of her situation sank in. Her husband, the man who had promised to love and honor her, was pursuing another woman. Not just any woman, but one who exuded class, kindness, and integrity. And now, that very same woman was paying her to investigate him. The cosmic joke was almost too much to bear. That evening, Sloane returned to their sleek downtown penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and million-dollar view of Puget Sound. Everything looked the same. The modern furniture Thatcher had insisted on, The abstract paintings that cost more than her first car, the marble countertops in the kitchen where she now rarely cooked, yet everything felt different, as if she were seeing her own life through a stranger's eyes. Thatcher wasn't home yet. A text message on her phone explained he was caught in meetings and would be home late. How many times had she read those exact words without question? How many dinners had grown cold waiting for him? How many nights had she fallen asleep alone, accepting his side of the bed would remain empty until the early hours of the morning? Sloane poured herself a glass of the expensive Cabernet Thatcher kept for special occasions and walked to the wall of windows. The city lights twinkled below, each one representing a life, a story, a truth. How many of those lights belonged to women like her, living in beautiful prisons of their own making? She pulled out her phone and opened the secure folder where she kept notes on her cases. With fingers that trembled slightly, she created a new file and titled it Operation Mirror. It was time to turn her professional skills inward, to investigate the man she had pledged her life to, the man who was now planning to defraud an innocent woman who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. The next morning, Sloane called Delphine to arrange their first official meeting to discuss the case parameters. They agreed to meet at a small cafe near Pike Place Market, neutral territory far from the upscale restaurants Thatcher frequented. Sloane arrived early and secured a quiet corner table. When Delphine walked in, heads turned. Despite her age, she carried herself with the confident grace of a woman who had nothing to prove. She wore a simple but clearly expensive cream-colored suit, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. "Thank you for meeting me," Delphine said, settling into the chair opposite Sloane. She placed a small package on the table. "I brought you something, a small token from France. It's lavender honey from Provence. My grandmother always said sweet things make difficult conversations easier." The thoughtful gesture struck Sloane like a physical blow. This was the woman her husband was planning to deceive, someone who brought gifts to business meetings, who thought of others' comfort even when discussing potential heartbreak. "That's very kind," Sloane managed, accepting the gift. "About your case, I've already begun preliminary work. I'll need some more information about your interactions with—" She couldn't bring herself to say his name. "With Thatcher," Delphine supplied, pulling out a leather-bound notebook. "I've kept track of our meetings, the things he's told me about his business and background. I hope that helps." As Delphine spoke, detailing the elaborate stories Thatcher had spun about his international real estate ventures, his childhood in Connecticut, he had actually grown up in Oregon, and his dreams of building sustainable luxury developments in emerging markets, Sloane felt a chill creep down her spine. The man Delphine described was both familiar and a complete stranger. It was Thatcher's voice, Thatcher's mannerisms, but a completely fabricated history. "He mentioned he has property in Vancouver," Delphine continued, consulting her notes. "He invited me to visit next month, said he wants to show me the development site for our potential joint venture." "Joint venture?" Sloane asked, her professional mask slipping momentarily. "Yes," Delphine nodded, a hint of excitement in her voice. "He suggested combining our expertise, my European connections with his North American portfolio. He has presented some preliminary documents, but nothing I would sign without proper due diligence, of course. That's partly why I hired you. I don't mix business with pleasure without thorough investigation." Smart woman, Sloane thought. Smarter than I was. As they parted, Delphine touched Sloane's arm gently. "There's something special about you, Ms. Ridley. I feel I can trust you completely. It's rare to find that in business, or in life." The words landed like stones in Sloane's stomach. Trust. What a fragile, precious thing it was, and how easily it could be shattered. That night, when Thatcher returned home, Sloane studied him with new eyes. The way he loosened his tie, the practiced smile he gave her, the casual kiss on her cheek that felt more like habit than affection. Had it always been this way, or had she simply failed to notice the performance? "How was your day?" he asked, pouring himself a whiskey. Sloane thought of Delphine's notebook, of the fabricated business ventures, of the $50,000 sitting in her business account. She thought of the honey from Provence and the trust in a kind woman's eyes. "Interesting," she replied, raising her glass in a silent toast. "I took on a new case today. Something tells me it might be the most important one of my career. I've been thinking about Aspen for the holidays," Thatcher said over breakfast 3 days later, casually scrolling through his phone. "The Crawfords offered us their chalet again. 5 bedrooms, private chef, the works." Sloane observed him over the rim of her coffee mug, noting how he didn't actually look up to gauge her reaction. In the 72 hours since meeting with Delphine, she had begun cataloging these small moments, the casual way he made decisions that affected them both without genuine consultation, how his attention remained divided even during supposedly intimate moments. "That sounds lovely," she replied, matching his casual tone while her mind calculated the implications. Aspen would take her away from Seattle during a crucial investigation period. "When were you thinking?" "December 20th through New Year's. I've already cleared my schedule." He finally glanced up, flashing the charismatic smile that had once made her heart race. Now it activated her professional skepticism. "Unless you have other plans?" "Not yet. Let me check my calendar at the office." The lie came easily, buying her time to consider how to handle this unexpected complication. Thatcher nodded, returning to his phone. "Just let me know by the end of the week." Tom's asking. Tom Crawford. Another wealthy client. Or Mark. Sloane made a mental note to add his name to her growing investigation board, which now occupied the small storage unit she had rented 3 blocks from her office. It wasn't ideal, but she couldn't risk Thatcher stumbling upon her research at home or work. "Will do," she promised, standing to rinse her mug in the sink. "I'm heading out early today." Peterson case. The Peterson case was real. A straightforward infidelity investigation involving a shipping magnate's 3rd wife. But it would take up only her morning. The afternoon was reserved for deeper exploration of Thatcher's activities, beginning with the mysterious property he claimed to own in Vancouver. As soon as Thatcher left for his downtown office, a location Sloane had embarrassingly never visited in their 6 years together, she gathered her surveillance equipment and headed to her own office. Her assistant, Grace, looked up in surprise when she entered. "You're early," Grace observed, pushing her glasses up her nose. At 25, she was whip-smart and refreshingly straightforward, qualities that had made Sloane hire her on the spot 3 years ago. "Change of plans. I need you to reschedule my afternoon appointments for the rest of the week. Family emergency." Grace's eyebrows shot up, but she asked no questions. Another quality Sloane appreciated. "Consider it done." "Anything else?" Sloane hesitated. She needed help with the expanding investigation, but bringing Grace into this mess felt both unprofessional and potentially dangerous. If Thatcher's deception was as extensive as she suspected, involving others could put them at risk. "Actually, yes. I need property records for Vancouver, British Columbia. Specifically, anything under the name Thatcher Wade or Atlas Holdings." Grace's fingers paused over her keyboard. "Atlas Holdings? Isn't that—" "Yes," Sloane confirmed, keeping her voice steady. "It's Thatcher's company." "Oh." A beat of silence. "Personal research?" "You could say that." Sloane forced a smile. "Just updating our financial records." Grace nodded slowly, unconvinced but discreet enough not to press further. "I'll have those records for you by tomorrow." "Perfect. Now, let's wrap up this Peterson case." 4 hours later, Sloane had conclusive evidence of Mrs. Peterson's affair with her tennis instructor, predictable but profitable, and was crossing the border into Canada. The drive to Vancouver took longer than expected due to unexpected construction, giving her ample time to consider the strange path her life had taken. Just 10 days ago, she had been Sloane Ridley, successful private detective with a seemingly perfect marriage. The occasional doubts about Thatcher's business practices had been easy to dismiss when weighed against the comfort and security he provided. Now, she was investigating her own husband while being paid by the woman he intended to defraud, questioning everything from their first meeting to their last conversation. How had she missed the signs? As a professional who prided herself on observation and deduction, the failure felt both personal and profound. By mid-afternoon, Sloane was walking through an upscale neighborhood in West Vancouver, approaching the address Thatcher had given Delphine. Her heart pounded as she turned onto the tree-lined street of multi-million-dollar homes. Part of her still hoped for an innocent explanation. Perhaps Thatcher really was a successful real estate investor who simply kept his professional and personal lives separate. Perhaps the separate identities were for tax purposes, or the thought died abruptly when she reached the supposed address of Thatcher's cornerstone property. Standing before her was not a luxury development, but a modest public park with a children's playground. There was no building, no construction site, nothing remotely resembling the exclusive condominium project with panoramic ocean views he had described to Delphine. Sloane sat heavily on a bench, the reality of Thatcher's deception settling over her like a cold fog. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a white lie. This was calculated fraud. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Delphine. "Any developments? Thatcher invited me to dinner tomorrow evening at Maison Laurent." Maison Laurent, one of Seattle's most exclusive French restaurants. Thatcher had taken Sloane there exactly once, on their 5th anniversary. The memory of that evening, the candlelight, the champagne, his seemingly heartfelt toast to many more years together, now felt like a scene from someone else's life. Following several promising leads, Sloane typed back, careful to maintain professional distance. Would it be possible to get the exact time of your dinner? Surveillance opportunity. The response came quickly. 8 o'clock. Should I wear the emerald earrings he complimented last time? The question, so ordinary and feminine, caught Sloane off guard. While she investigated cheating spouses and dishonest partners daily, she rarely considered the human moments preceding her surveillance, the careful selection of outfits, the hopeful application of perfume, the nervous anticipation of a special evening. These intimate preparations for connection, all while she lurked in shadows with her camera, documenting betrayal. "The emeralds would be perfect," she replied after a moment's hesitation. "They'll stand out in photographs." On the drive back to Seattle, Sloane stopped at a roadside diner just south of the border, the kind of nondescript place Thatcher would never enter. Over a plate of mediocre meatloaf and lumpy mashed potatoes, she began mapping out the wider investigation on her laptop. If the Vancouver property was fictitious, what other lies had he told? How deep did this deception go? She created a timeline of their relationship, forcing herself to examine it with clinical detachment. They had met at a charity gala 6 years ago, Sloane attending as security for a wealthy client, Thatcher as a business associate of the host. He had approached her at the bar, charming and attentive in a room full of people who looked through service professionals like they were furniture. Within 3 months, they were living together in his downtown apartment. Within 6, they were married in a small ceremony in the San Juan Islands. Looking back, she realized how little she knew about his life before they met. The few friends of his who attended the wedding were business associates who had since faded from their lives. His parents were deceased, or so he claimed, and he was an only child with complicated family history he preferred not to discuss. How convenient. How perfectly constructed to avoid verification. By the time Sloane returned to Seattle, evening had fallen. Rather than heading home to the penthouse, she drove to her storage unit investigation room. The small space was rapidly transforming into a war room, with photos, documents, and timelines taped to every available surface. In the center, illuminated by a single overhead bulb, was the photograph Delphine had provided. Thatcher, in a tailored suit, smiling confidently at a real estate conference. Sloane added the Vancouver findings to her growing collection, then hesitated before pulling out her personal photo album, the one physical memento she insisted on keeping in a digital age. She flipped through the pages until she found their wedding photos. Thatcher beamed at the camera, handsome and polished in his designer tuxedo, his arm around her waist. They looked happy. They had been happy, hadn't they? Or had she simply been another mark, a useful cover for his operations? A private detective wife? What better legitimacy could a con man ask for? The question that haunted her most wasn't about Thatcher's deception, but her own complicity. The luxury vacations, the expensive gifts, the lifestyle well beyond what her detective agency should have afforded them. She had accepted it all without pressing for details, content to believe in the fantasy of her successful husband's business acumen. Her phone chimed with another message from Delphine. "He just called. Says he has something special to discuss tomorrow night. Could this be a proposal? I know it seems fast, but at my age..." The hopeful uncertainty in those words made Sloane's stomach clench. She thought of Delphine's elegant notebook, her careful research, her thoughtful gifts, all hallmarks of someone who approached life with genuine care and consideration for others. And tomorrow night, Thatcher would look into those kind eyes and continue spinning his web of lies, drawing her deeper into whatever scheme he had planned. "Not if I can help it," Sloane thought, with sudden fierce determination. She gathered her equipment for tomorrow's surveillance: the high-resolution camera, the directional microphone, the inconspicuous clothing that would allow her to blend into the background of an upscale restaurant. For the first time in her career, she would be documenting her own husband's betrayal, gathering evidence not just for a client, but for herself. As she locked up the storage unit, her phone rang. Thatcher's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, where are you?" His voice sounded relaxed, unsuspecting. "I thought we could grab dinner at that new place in Ballard. My treat." The casual presumption in his tone, the certainty that she would rearrange her evening at his suggestion, the "my treat," as if he weren't spending their communal money, struck Sloane with fresh clarity. "Sorry. Working late on the Peterson case," she replied, injecting apologetic disappointment into her voice. "Don't wait up. It might be an all-nighter." "Again?" A note of irritation slipped through his polished veneer. "That's the third time this month." Was that suspicion in his voice? Did he sense something had changed? Sloane felt a flicker of panic, followed by grim amusement at the irony. The cheater concerned about being cheated on. "I know. I'm sorry. The client's paying premium for fast results." She softened her tone. "Rain check for tomorrow?" "Can't. Business dinner with overseas investors." "Delphine," she thought. He's referring to Delphine. "No problem. Maybe this weekend?" "Sure thing. Get some rest when you can." The concern in his voice sounded genuine, which only deepened the mystery of Thatcher Wade. Was everything a performance? Or were there fragments of truth mixed in with the lies? And which possibility was more terrifying? That he was incapable of real emotion, or that he could feel genuine affection for her while systematically deceiving her? As she drove through the rainy Seattle streets toward her empty office, where she planned to spend the night rather than return home, Sloane realized she was no longer just investigating a potential fraud. She was excavating the ruins of her marriage, searching for something authentic among the rubble. The interior of Maison Laurent was a study in old-world elegance: crystal chandeliers, cream-colored tablecloths, and discreet servers who seemed to materialize and vanish with practiced precision. Sloane adjusted the lapel of her charcoal pantsuit, which concealed both a recording device and a miniature camera. After 15 years as a private investigator, technology had become increasingly sophisticated, allowing her to document betrayals with minimal equipment. She had secured a table with a partial view of the restaurant's most romantic corner, a secluded alcove where Thatcher had requested a table for his special evening with Delphine. From her position, Sloane could observe them without being immediately visible, especially with the strategic placement of a large floral arrangement between their tables. When Delphine arrived at 7:55, Sloane nearly gasped aloud. The Frenchwoman was stunning in a midnight blue dress that complemented her silver-streaked dark hair. The promised emerald earrings caught the low lighting, casting small green reflections when she moved. But it was her expression that truly captivated Sloane, a mixture of dignified anticipation and youthful hope that made her appear both vulnerable and powerful simultaneously. Thatcher arrived 3 minutes later, impeccable in a suit Sloane recognized, one she had helped him select at Nordstrom last Christmas, an indulgently expensive purchase she had justified as an investment in his professional appearance. He greeted Delphine with practiced charm, kissing her hand rather than her cheek, maintaining the physical distance that had made the Frenchwoman suspicious, while still conveying romantic interest. "You look absolutely breathtaking," Thatcher said, his voice carrying clearly through Sloane's earpiece. The directional microphone was earning its exorbitant price tag. "Those earrings bring out the remarkable color in your eyes." Delphine smiled, touching one earring self-consciously. "Thank you. They were a gift from my late husband. I rarely wear them, but tonight seemed special." A flicker of something, calculation, concern, crossed Thatcher's face before his charming smile returned. "I'm honored. And yes, tonight is indeed special." Sloane's stomach tightened. The manipulation was so obvious from her vantage point, yet she understood how effective it would be. Thatcher was positioning himself as respectful of Delphine's past, while hinting at a future together, the perfect balance for a widow of her sophistication. Over the next hour, Sloane documented their dinner with mechanical precision, focusing on the facts rather than the emotional impact of watching her husband seduce another woman. She photographed Thatcher refilling Delphine's wine glass with attentive care, his fingertips lingering near hers without quite touching. She recorded his apparently heartfelt stories about charitable work in developing countries, work Sloane knew with certainty did not exist. When the main course arrived, duck confit for Delphine, filet mignon for Thatcher, he leaned forward with newfound intensity. "Delphine, there's something important I want to discuss with you." The Frenchwoman set down her fork, giving him her full attention. "I'm listening." "The Vancouver property has exceeded all projections. The investors are impressed with the preliminary work, but they're requiring additional capital to move forward with the sustainable technology components." He paused, taking a sip of water. "I've been authorized to offer a limited partnership opportunity to select individuals. Given your expertise and our personal connection, you were my first thought." Delphine tilted her head slightly. "I'm intrigued. What exactly are you proposing?" "A $5 million investment for a 15% stake in the property. The projected return is conservative at 22% within 18 months, but I personally believe it could reach 30% given the market trends." Sloane nearly dropped her fork. $5 million! The scale of Thatcher's deception was staggering. This wasn't a small-time confidence scheme. This was grand-scale fraud. "That's a substantial investment," Delphine replied carefully. "I would need to see the property, review the legal documentation, have my team conduct due diligence." "Of course," Thatcher agreed smoothly. "I anticipated that, which is why I've arranged for us to fly to Vancouver this weekend. My helicopter will take us directly to the site. You'll see everything firsthand, meet the architects, review the plans." He reached across the table, finally taking her hand in his. "I wouldn't offer this to just anyone, Delphine. This is as much about trust as it is about business." Trust. The word echoed in Sloane's mind like an accusation. "And is that all you wanted to discuss tonight?" Delphine asked, a hint of disappointment coloring her voice. "Business?" Thatcher's expression softened. "No, not just business." He caressed her hand gently. "I've never met anyone like you, Delphine. Your intelligence, your grace, your kindness. You've awakened something in me I thought was long buried. I know we agreed to take things slowly, but I find myself thinking about you constantly." The worst part, Sloane realized with a chill, was that he sounded completely sincere. The emotion in his voice, the tender way he looked at Delphine, it mirrored exactly how he had once looked at her. Had those moments been performances too? Had there ever been any truth between them? I feel the same way, Delphine admitted, her cheeks coloring slightly. Though I must confess, your reluctance to pursue physical affection has made me wonder if your interest is truly romantic. Thatcher looked down, a perfectly executed display of vulnerability. After losing my wife to cancer 3 years ago, I promised myself I wouldn't rush into anything physical until I was emotionally ready. He met Delphine's eyes again. You deserve more than half of me, Delphine. You deserve all of me, and I'm almost there. The fabricated dead wife was new. Sloane felt a surge of bitter amusement. At least he hadn't killed her off in his fictional narrative. I had no idea, Delphine said softly. You never mentioned. It's difficult to talk about, Thatcher interrupted gently. But with you, I'm finding it easier to open up. He squeezed her hand. Let's focus on the present. Will you come to Vancouver with me this weekend? Delphine hesitated only briefly. Yes, I'd like that very much. After they had finished their meal, and Thatcher had paid with his platinum card, the same card linked to the account he shared with Sloane, he escorted Delphine outside. Sloane followed at a discreet distance, watching as he helped the Frenchwoman into a waiting town car. Until this weekend, he said, finally kissing her, not on the lips, but at the corner of her mouth, an intimate gesture that promised more to come. I'll have my assistant send the details tomorrow. As the car pulled away, Thatcher stood on the sidewalk, watching it disappear into the rainy night. Sloane held her breath, ducking into a doorway to avoid detection. Would he head home now? Or was there more to his evening? To her surprise, after the town car turned the corner, Thatcher's shoulders slumped slightly, and he rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture of exhaustion she recognized from their private moments. It was so at odds with the confident man who had just charmed Delphine that Sloane nearly gasped. For a brief moment, she glimpsed something real beneath the performance. Then Thatcher straightened, adjusted his tie, and walked briskly toward the restaurant's valet station. Within minutes, he was driving away in his sleek Audi, not toward their penthouse, but in the opposite direction. Sloane hesitated only briefly before following him. The Vancouver trip was scheduled for 3 days away. She needed as much evidence as possible before then, both to protect Delphine and to understand the full scope of her husband's deception. 20 minutes later, Thatcher parked outside a luxury apartment building in a neighborhood Sloane had never known him to frequent. He entered using a key card, disappearing into the elevator. Sloane parked across the street, settling in for what might be a long wait. Her phone buzzed with a text from Delphine. Dinner was lovely. He invited me to Vancouver this weekend to see the property. Should I go? Sloane stared at the message, her investigator's instincts warring with her growing personal connection to Delphine. The professional answer was yes. Go, gather evidence, document everything. But the woman who had seen the kindness behind Delphine's elegant exterior wanted to protect her from further deception. Before she could respond, another text arrived from Grace. Found something interesting in those property records. Atlas Holdings doesn't own anything in Vancouver, but it does own a condo at the High Line in Seattle. Purchased 3 years ago under a subsidiary called Wade International. Address attached. Sloane checked the address. It matched exactly where Thatcher had just entered. A secret apartment. A fake dead wife. A non-existent Vancouver property. $5 million at stake. The pieces were forming a pattern more disturbing than she had initially imagined. This wasn't just about Thatcher pursuing another woman. This was systematic fraud on a massive scale. And based on Grace's timeline, it had begun 3 years ago, when things between them had still seemed perfect. At 11:42, the lights in a 6th-floor apartment went dark. At 11:53, Thatcher emerged from the building, got into his car, and drove toward their penthouse. Sloane waited until he was out of sight before approaching the building. The night security guard was young, probably working his way through college. Sloane flashed her investigator's license. Working a case, she explained with professional confidence. Need to verify a resident's occupancy for court records. Apartment 612. The guard hesitated. I'm not supposed to. It's just a verification. Sloane pressed, sliding $200 across the desk. Does Thatcher Wade regularly occupy that unit? The money disappeared into the guard's pocket. Mr. Wade? Yeah, he's here a couple times a week. Usually with different women, if you know what I mean. He leaned forward conspiratorially. High-end types. Classy. Not what you'd think. Sloane kept her expression neutral, despite the knife twisting in her gut. How long has this been going on? Since before I started, and I've been here 2 years. He shrugged. The night guy before me mentioned it during training. Said Mr. Wade was a big tipper, always friendly. I see. And tonight's visitor? The guard checked his log. No visitor tonight. He came alone. Sometimes does that too. Stays a few hours, then leaves. Weird, huh? Sloane thanked him and returned to her car, her mind racing. An apartment for assignations made sense given what she now knew about Thatcher, but why visit alone? What was he doing there for hours with no companion? She texted Delphine back. Go to Vancouver. Document everything. We'll meet Sunday to discuss findings. Then she drove home, arriving shortly after midnight. Thatcher was already in bed, seemingly asleep. Sloane stood in the doorway of their bedroom, studying the man she had married. In sleep, his face relaxed into an expression of almost childlike vulnerability, the same unguarded quality she had glimpsed briefly outside the restaurant. Who was he, really? The charming, sophisticated businessman? The calculating fraudster? The exhausted man who rubbed his face when he thought no one was watching? All of these? None of these? And who was she, to have lived alongside him for 6 years without seeing through the performance? The next morning, Sloane waited until Thatcher left for meetings before calling Grace. I need everything you can find on that Highline apartment. Purchase records, utility bills, surveillance footage from the lobby if possible. Already working on it, Grace replied. Also found something else interesting. 3 years ago, around when the apartment was purchased, Wade International made a series of wire transfers to offshore accounts totaling nearly $2 million. The money originated from accounts belonging to a Catherine Blackwell. The name meant nothing to Sloane. Who is she? Wealthy widow, late 60s at the time, owned several commercial properties in Portland. Died unexpectedly of a heart attack shortly after the transfers. A chill ran down Sloane's spine. Any connection between her and Thatcher? Nothing obvious in public records. But get this, 6 months before her death, she updated her will to include a substantial bequest to a charity called the New Beginnings Foundation. The foundation's board of directors included one Thatcher Wade. Let me guess. The foundation doesn't exist anymore. Dissolved 3 months after receiving the bequest. Approximately $7 million, allegedly for educational initiatives in developing nations. $7 million. And now he was targeting Delphine for $5 million more. The pattern was becoming clearer and considerably darker than Sloane had initially feared. Grace, she said slowly, I think we're dealing with something much bigger than infidelity. I need you to search for any wealthy widows or divorcees who died unexpectedly after making significant donations or investments with Thatcher or any of his known business entities. A pause on the line. Sloane, are you saying he might be— I don't know what I'm saying yet, Sloane interrupted. Just get me the information. And Grace, be careful. Don't access anything from the office computers. Use the secure laptop I gave you. Public Wi-Fi only. After hanging up, Sloane sat motionless at her kitchen island, the morning sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the luxury that surrounded her. Luxury potentially paid for with a dead woman's money. Her phone chimed with a text from Thatcher. Heading to Portland for meetings. Back tomorrow night. Miss you already. Portland, where Catherine Blackwell had lived and died. Sloane closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. The man she had married, the man she had loved, was not just a con artist targeting wealthy women. He might be something far worse. And in 2 days, Delphine would be alone with him in Vancouver, believing they were visiting a non-existent property. Her $5 million hanging in the balance. Time was running out. Morning sunlight illuminated the dust motes floating in the air of Storage Unit 17 as Sloane pinned another photo to her investigation board. The image showed Thatcher, impeccably dressed as always, entering a law office in downtown Portland. According to Grace's research, the firm specialized in estate planning for high-net-worth individuals. The timestamp showed 3:15 p.m. yesterday. "He told me he was in meetings all day," Sloane murmured to herself, adding a note beneath the photo. The web of red string connecting the images, documents, and timeline entries had grown increasingly complex over the past 48 hours. At the center remained Delphine's photograph of Thatcher, but surrounding it now were images of 5 different women, all wealthy, all older than Thatcher, all dead within 6 months of substantial financial transfers to his various shell companies. Catherine Blackwell was merely the first. After her came Margaret Chen, stroke, $8 million, Vivian Holbrook, car accident, $4.5 million, Elizabeth Winters, medication overdose, $6 million, and most recently, Patricia Donovan, apparent suicide, $10 million. Each death had been investigated and ruled either natural or accidental, or, in Patricia's case, self-inflicted. None had raised sufficient suspicion to trigger deeper investigation. None, that is, until now. Sloane stepped back, surveying the horrifying pattern that had emerged. The women were different ages, ethnicities, and backgrounds, but they shared crucial similarities beyond their wealth. All were single, widowed or divorced, with few close family connections. All were known for their charitable giving and social consciousness. All had met Thatcher at high-end charity functions, and all had died alone, just like Delphine could, if Sloane didn't act quickly. Her phone buzzed with a text from Delphine. "Packing for Vancouver. Thatcher arranged for private helicopter tomorrow morning." Nervous but excited, Sloane's fingers hovered over the keyboard, weighing her response. She couldn't tell Delphine the full truth via text. It was too dangerous, too easily dismissed as outlandish without the evidence spread before her. But she needed to delay the trip somehow. Discovered concerning information. Need to meet urgently before your trip. Breakfast tomorrow, 7 a.m.? Crucial developments to discuss. The response came almost immediately. "Can't tomorrow morning. Helicopter leaves at 8. Can we meet tonight instead?" Sloane checked her watch. 9:23 a.m. Thatcher wouldn't return from Portland until tomorrow evening, according to his text. That gave her a window of opportunity. "Yes, my office, 7 p.m. I'll send the address." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. "Is everything all right? You sound worried." How to respond to that? Everything was far from all right. The man Delphine was falling for, the man Sloane had married, was potentially connected to 5 suspicious deaths and millions in fraudulent transactions. But she couldn't convey that level of alarm without explanation. "Just need to show you some preliminary findings before you commit further resources. Professional due diligence." Another pause before Delphine's reply. "Understood. See you tonight." Sloane lowered her phone, turning back to the evidence board. She needed to prepare a careful presentation, enough to convince Delphine of the danger without overwhelming her with the most disturbing possibilities. The Frenchwoman struck Sloane as remarkably level-headed, but even the most rational person might struggle to accept that their romantic interest could be not just a con artist, but possibly something far more sinister. Her phone rang, Grace's name flashing on the screen. "I've been digging into the financial structures," Grace said without preamble when Sloane answered. "It's ingenious, in a horrible way. Each woman's money was channeled through a different set of shell companies, eventually consolidating in accounts in Belize and the Cayman Islands. Those accounts show regular withdrawals, living expenses, I'd guess, but the bulk of the money remains offshore. How much total? Sloan asked, dreading the answer. Conservative estimate? $35 million. Minimum. Sloan closed her eyes, absorbing the magnitude. And my name? Am I connected to any of it? Not directly. Everything's under variations of his name or his company's. But what? The penthouse is owned by one of the shell companies, and your joint account receives monthly transfers from an LLC that traces back to the offshore accounts. Technically, you've been benefiting from these funds for years. The implication hung unspoken between them. Sloan had been living on blood money, unknowingly, but undeniably. The realization made her physically ill. There's more, Grace continued, her voice unnaturally steady. I found connections between Thatcher and Dr. Julian Mercer, a cardiology specialist. He signed Catherine Blackwell's death certificate. And get this, he was the attending physician for Margaret Chen, too. 2 of the 5 women, Sloan murmured. That's beyond coincidental. It gets worse. Mercer recently purchased a vacation home in Turks and Caicos. $3.2 million. Cash transaction. A potential accomplice. The pieces were falling into horrifying place. One more thing, Grace added. I found the helicopter company for tomorrow's Vancouver trip, Coastal Airways. They do have a reservation underway for tomorrow morning, but the flight plan shows the destination as a private airstrip outside Seattle, not Vancouver. Sloane's blood ran cold. Where outside Seattle? Remote property in the Olympic Peninsula. Heavily wooded area. Minimal population. Nearest town is 30 minutes by car. Isolation. Privacy. No witnesses. Grace, I need you to contact a friend of mine, Detective Michael Torres with Seattle PD. Tell him everything we've found. Everything. I'm meeting with Delphine tonight to warn her, but we need law enforcement involved now. Already compiled a complete file, Grace replied, her efficiency masking what must be considerable distress. I'll contact Torres immediately. And Sloan? Be careful. If Thatcher realizes what we know, I know. Just focus on getting Torres that information. I'll handle Delphine. Body. After ending the call, Sloan spent the next hour creating a portable version of her evidence board, a digital presentation with key documents, photographs, and timeline entries, carefully organized to tell the damning story without overwhelming the viewer. She deliberately excluded the most speculative elements about potential murder, focusing instead on the proven fraud aspects. That alone should be sufficient to dissuade Delphine from boarding any helicopter with Thatcher Wade. At 6:30 p.m., Sloan arrived at her office to prepare for Delphine's visit. She had just set up her laptop and a pot of tea, remembering Delphine's preference, when her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. This is Detective Torres. Got your assistant's information. Deeply concerning. Need to meet ASAP to discuss next steps. Relief flooded through her. Torres was one of the good ones, thorough, incorruptible, and importantly, someone who had taken her seriously in previous professional interactions. Meeting potential victim tonight at 7, my office. Can you join? On my way. ETA 20 minutes. Perfect. Having official law enforcement present would lend credibility to her findings and help Delphine understand the severity of the situation. Sloan began arranging chairs for the impromptu meeting when her office phone rang. The caller ID showed her building's security desk. Ms. Ridley? There's a gentleman here to see you. Says he's your husband. Thatcher. Here. Now. When he was supposed to be in Portland until tomorrow. Did he say what he wants? Sloan asked, fighting to keep her voice casual. Just that he's surprising you with dinner. Should I send him up? Her mind raced through possibilities. Refusing would immediately signal that something was wrong. Agreeing would put her alone with him before Torres arrived. Yes, send him up. Thank you. She ended the call, heart pounding. Why was he back early? Had he somehow discovered her investigation? Or was this just one of his occasional romantic gestures, ironically timed at the worst possible moment? Quickly, she texted Torres. Situation developing. Suspect arriving at my office now. Proceed with caution when you arrive." Then she closed her laptop, concealing the evidence presentation, and moved to the small kitchenette to put on coffee. A normal, wifely action that might help maintain the illusion that nothing had changed between them. 2 minutes later, Thatcher entered, carrying a bottle of champagne and a bag from their favorite Italian restaurant. "Surprise!" he grinned, setting the items on her desk. "I wrapped up the Portland meetings early and thought, why not surprise my beautiful workaholic wife with dinner at her office?" His timing was too perfect to be coincidental. The Portland meetings, the early return, the unexpected visit to her office the exact evening she was meeting with Delphine. "That's so thoughtful," she managed, accepting his kiss on her cheek. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." "Best kind of surprise, then." He began unpacking the food containers. "I got your favorite, mushroom risotto with white truffle oil, and tiramisu for dessert." The thoughtfulness of remembering her favorite dish stood in stark contrast to the evidence board in the storage unit, with its 5 dead women and millions in stolen money. Which was the real Thatcher? The attentive husband or the calculating predator? Perhaps both existed within the same man. The charm and attentiveness merely tools of his trade, deployed with precision whether seducing a mark or maintaining his cover with his wife. "Wine?" he offered, producing an expensive bottle from the bag. Not champagne. That was for another purpose, she now realized. Champagne was for celebration. For Delphine, after securing her $5 million investment. "Sure," she nodded, checking her watch surreptitiously. 6:48. Delphine would arrive in 12 minutes. Torres shortly thereafter. She needed to get Thatcher out of the office before either of them appeared. As he poured the wine, his phone chimed with a text. He glanced at it, his expression momentarily hardening before smoothing back into casual charm. "Work never stops, does it?" "Who was that?" she asked, striving for casual interest. "Just the Vancouver property manager. Confirming tomorrow's site visit." He handed her a glass. "Actually, I'll be gone overnight. Potential investors want a thorough tour, and there's a dinner afterward." The lies flowed so effortlessly from him, his expression giving nothing away. How had she never noticed before? Had she been so willfully blind? "Sounds important," she remarked, sipping her wine to avoid further comment. Each second that ticked by increased the danger of Delphine arriving, while Thatcher was still present. "It is. Could be the biggest deal of my career." He smiled, raising his glass. "To success." She clinked her glass against his, thinking of the Olympic Peninsula property where he intended to take Delphine. "To getting exactly what you deserve." 6:53. 7 minutes until Delphine's scheduled arrival. "Actually, Thatcher, this is lovely, but I'm in the middle of a time-sensitive case. Could we reschedule for tomorrow night when you're back? I promise I'll make it up to you." He studied her face, something calculating passing behind his eyes. What case is so urgent it can't wait an hour for dinner? The Peterson divorce. Court filing deadline tomorrow morning. The lie came smoothly. Perhaps she had learned more from him than she realized. "I see." He didn't move toward the door. Instead, he leaned against her desk, taking another sip of wine. "Funny thing about the Peterson case. I ran into Jim Peterson at the gym last week. He mentioned they'd settled out of court. No more need for surveillance." Ice formed in Sloane's stomach. He knew she was lying, which meant he might know much more. "Different Peterson," she improvised. "Sandra Peterson. Insurance fraud case." "Ah." He nodded, but his eyes had cooled considerably. "My mistake." 6:58. 2 minutes. Her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced down to see Delphine's name. "Running about 15 minutes late. Traffic. Terrible. So sorry." A reprieve, but a brief one. Torres would still arrive any minute. "Important client?" Thatcher asked, gesturing toward her phone. "Just Grace confirming a filing." She slipped the phone into her pocket, moving toward the door. "Really, Thatcher? It's sweet of you to bring dinner, but tonight is..." "Is what, Sloane?" His voice had lost all warmth. "What exactly is tonight?" The shift was sudden and chilling, the mask of the attentive husband dropping to reveal something cold and assessing beneath. This, she realized, was the real Thatcher Wade, the calculating predator who had orchestrated 5 women's financial ruin and possibly their deaths. And he knew something was wrong. "Tonight is busy," she finished firmly, meeting his gaze directly. "And I need to focus on my work." For a long moment, they stared at each other, a silent acknowledgement that the pretense between them had cracked, though neither was yet ready to shatter it completely. Then his phone rang. He checked the screen, frowning slightly. "I need to take this. Business." He stepped into the hallway, closing her office door behind him. Sloane immediately moved to her desk, retrieving the small revolver she kept in a biometric safe in her bottom drawer. 6 years of marriage to Thatcher, and she had never once felt the need to arm herself in his presence. Now, the weight of the gun provided little comfort against the growing certainty of what she was facing. Through the frosted glass of her office door, she could see Thatcher's silhouette, gesturing as he spoke. He was agitated, another crack in the usually impeccable facade. Her phone buzzed again. Torres. 5 minutes out. Everything was converging too quickly. Thatcher in her office, Delphine on her way, Torres arriving imminently. The carefully orchestrated confrontation she had planned was unraveling into unpredictable chaos. Thatcher ended his call and re-entered the office, his expression once again composed, though tension remained visible in the set of his shoulders. "Work emergency," he announced with rehearsed regret. "Investor panic in the Vancouver project. I need to handle it immediately." He gathered the food containers, leaving the wine. "Rain check on dinner?" Relief mingled with suspicion. His sudden departure seemed too convenient, especially after his obvious reluctance to leave moments earlier. "Of course," she agreed, walking him to the door. "Good luck with the investors." He paused in the doorway, studying her face with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. "You know I love you, right? Everything I do, everything, is for us." Before she could formulate a response to this disturbing declaration, he leaned in and kissed her. Not the casual peck of routine affection, but something deeper, almost desperate. Then he was gone, striding toward the elevators without looking back. Sloane stood frozen, the ghost of his kiss burning against her lips like an accusation. What had just happened? What did he know? And most urgently, where was he going now? The digital clock on Sloane's desk flipped to 7:15 as Detective Michael Torres examined the evidence displayed on her laptop. His weathered face remained impassive, but the rapid tapping of his index finger against his thigh betrayed his agitation. "If even half of this is accurate," he said finally, "we're looking at one of the most sophisticated serial predators I've encountered in 27 years of law enforcement." "It's accurate," Sloane confirmed, pacing beside the window. "Grace triple verified every transaction, every connection, and there's likely more we haven't uncovered yet." Delphine sat utterly still in the visitor's chair, her elegant posture intact, despite the shock evident in her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was remarkably steady. "You believe he intended to eliminate me after securing my investment?" It wasn't a question. Sloane admired the Frenchwoman's composure in the face of such horrific revelations. Where another might have collapsed into hysterics or denial, Delphine was processing the information with the same analytical precision she presumably applied to her business dealings. "The evidence suggests that possibility," Torres answered carefully. "The pattern is consistent with his previous victims, and the isolated location where the helicopter was actually scheduled to land raises serious concerns. And there is no Vancouver property," Delphine stated flatly. "None," Sloane confirmed. "It was fabricated entirely. The plans, the projections, everything." A delicate tremor passed through Delphine's hands as she clasped them in her lap, the only visible sign of her distress. He seemed so genuine, so wounded. "The story about his deceased wife, also fabricated," Sloane interrupted gently. "Thatcher has never been married to anyone but me." Delphine looked up sharply. How can you be so calm? This man is your husband. The question struck Sloane with unexpected force. How indeed? Perhaps the professional detachment she had cultivated over years of investigating others' betrayals was now protecting her from the full emotional impact of her own. Or perhaps the truth was simpler. The marriage had been built on such elaborate deception that learning of Thatcher's true nature felt less like losing a husband and more like finally identifying an imposter. "My feelings aren't relevant right now," she replied. "What matters is preventing him from harming anyone else, starting with you." Torres's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening. The warrant for the Olympic Peninsula property just came through. "Tactical team is assembling now." "And Thatcher?" Sloane asked. "Still no sign of him. Officers are stationed at your penthouse, the Highline apartment, and all transportation hubs. His passport has been flagged." Torres stood, adjusting his jacket. "I need to join the tactical team. You two should remain here under officer protection until we have him in custody." After Torres departed, leaving a uniformed officer outside the door, an uneasy silence fell between the two women. The remnants of Thatcher's aborted romantic dinner, the wine glasses, the expensive bottle, sat on Sloane's desk like artifacts from another lifetime. "He brought dinner," Delphine observed, gesturing toward the items. "Tonight. Here." "Yes, he claimed to be surprising me, but the timing was too convenient. He knows something." Delphine stood and moved to the window, gazing out at Seattle's twinkling skyline. "In business, I've learned that desperate people make desperate choices when cornered." She turned to face Sloane. "If he suspects you're investigating him, you may be in as much danger as I am." The thought had occurred to Sloane, but hearing it voiced aloud brought its reality into sharper focus. The man she had shared a bed with for 6 years had potentially orchestrated the deaths of 5 women for financial gain. What would he do to protect himself and his $35 million if he believed she was close to exposing him? Her phone chimed with a text from Grace. "Just found something. Offshore accounts showing large withdrawals over past 72 hours. Nearly 8 million moved to untraceable cryptocurrency. He's liquidating." Sloane showed the message to Delphine, whose lips thinned in understanding. "He's preparing to run." "Or worse," Sloane replied, the possibilities multiplying in her mind. If Thatcher was extracting funds and suspected her investigation, his next logical step would be eliminating potential witnesses, starting with those closest to the case. She texted Grace immediately. "Go to Torres now. Don't go home. Have him place you in protective custody." The response was immediate. Already at precinct, Torres arranged security. Relief washed through her, but it was short-lived. Her phone rang, Thatcher's name flashing on the screen. Sloane exchanged a glance with Delphine, then answered, putting the call on speaker. "Hello?" "Hi, darling." His voice was casual, almost cheerful. "Checking if you wrapped up that urgent Peterson case yet." "Still working," she replied, matching his tone. "Should be another hour or so." "Perfect. I've arranged a special surprise for you at home. A little apology for interrupting your workday." A pause. "You'll come straight home when you're done, won't you? No detours?" The underlying instruction was clear. Come home alone, directly. No deviation from routine. "Of course," she assured him. "What kind of surprise? If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it?" His laugh sounded natural, but Sloane detected the slight strain beneath it. "Let's just say it's something to celebrate our future together." The implication sent a chill down her spine. "Sounds mysterious. I'm intrigued." "You should be. It's quite the grand gesture." Another pause. "I love you, Sloane. Everything I've ever done has been to secure our future. I hope you'll remember that." Before she could respond, he ended the call. Sloane stared at the phone, her investigator's mind dissecting each word, each inflection. "He's saying goodbye," he realized aloud. "The surprise is a distraction. He's already gone, or planning to leave imminently." Delphine frowned. "Or it's a trap to lure you home alone." Both possibilities seemed equally plausible. Sloan immediately called Torres, relaying the conversation. "Don't go home," he instructed firmly. "We'll send a team to check out this surprise. Where are you now?" "Still at my office with Delphine and Officer Chen." "Stay there. I'm sending additional units." His voice lowered. "Sloan, we searched the Olympic Peninsula property, found digging equipment, plastic sheeting, chemicals consistent with body disposal. It's worse than we thought." The confirmation of her darkest suspicions should have shocked her, but instead, Sloan felt an eerie calm descend. The pieces were fully in place now, the complete picture of the man she had married revealed at last. "There's something else," Torres continued. "We've connected Thatcher to a 6th case from 2 years ago in Chicago. Different name, same M.O. He's been doing this longer than we realized." After ending the call, Sloan turned to find Delphine watching her with a mixture of concern and determination. "You saved my life," the French woman said simply. "Professional obligation," Sloan demurred. "No," Delphine shook her head firmly. "You could have simply warned me against the investment. That would have fulfilled your professional obligation. Instead, you pursued the full truth, even knowing it would destroy your marriage and potentially implicate you financially." She reached out, squeezing Sloan's hand briefly. "That was courage, not obligation." Before Sloan could respond, her phone rang again, this time an unknown number. "Ms. Ridley?" An unfamiliar male voice, tense with urgency. "This is Officer Daniels with Seattle PD. There's been an incident at your residence. Detective Torres requested I contact you immediately." "What kind of incident?" Sloan demanded, dread pooling in her stomach. "Explosion, ma'am. Fire department is on scene, but the preliminary assessment indicates a deliberate detonation. Your penthouse has been," a hesitation, "significantly damaged. The surprise, a bomb or incendiary device, timed to eliminate evidence and potentially Sloan herself, had she followed his instructions to come directly home." "Any casualties?" she asked, her investigators' training taking over. "None reported. The blast was contained to your unit, which was unoccupied." Teet. After gathering additional details, Sloan ended the call and relayed the information to Delphine, whose eyes widened in horror. "He tried to kill you," she stated flatly. "Or destroy evidence. Possibly both." Sloan's mind was already racing ahead. "But the timing is wrong. If he wanted to eliminate me, why not wait until I was home? Unless he knew she wouldn't come home. Unless he already knew the extent of her investigation. Unless this was merely a diversion while he implemented his true escape plan. The helicopter, she realized suddenly. It's scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow, but there's nothing stopping him from arranging an earlier departure, especially if he has the pilot on his payroll. Sloan immediately called Torres again, sharing her theory. "Check Coastal Airways. He may be attempting to leave via the scheduled helicopter tonight, rather than tomorrow." "On it," Torres confirmed. "I'll dispatch units to their airfield immediately." The next 2 hours passed in tense waiting. Delphine made calls to secure her financial accounts against unauthorized access. Sloan coordinated with Grace to preserve evidence and back up all digital files related to the investigation. Both women jumped at small noises, constantly checking the windows despite the reassuring presence of Officer Chen outside the door. At 9:47 p.m., Torres called back. "We've got him," he announced without preamble. "Attempted to board the helicopter at Coastal Airways' private airfield 30 minutes ago. Had 3 suitcases and a briefcase. Pilot confirms he changed the flight plan to Mexico earlier today." Sloan closed her eyes, relief washing through her. Was he armed? Handgun in his jacket pocket, unregistered, and the briefcase contained nearly $200,000 in cash, plus multiple passports with different identities, all with his photo. It was over. The elaborate deception that had been her marriage had come to its inevitable conclusion. Yet alongside the relief came an unexpected hollowness, not grief for the man himself, but mourning for the life she had believed was real. "I want to see him," she found herself saying. Torres's hesitation was palpable even through the phone. "Sloan, I'm not sure that's—" "I need to," she insisted. "Not just as his wife, but as an investigator. I need to understand." After a long pause, Torres agreed to arrange a brief meeting at the precinct once Thatcher was processed. "But not tonight," he stipulated. "Tomorrow, after we've secured the scene and confirmed he was working alone." When the call ended, Sloan found Delphine watching her with understanding in her eyes. "You need closure," the French woman observed. "I need truth," Sloan corrected. 6 years of my life were built on elaborate fiction. I need at least one moment of absolute honesty from him, even if it's unpleasant." Delphine nodded, gathering her purse. "When this is over, when you've had that moment of truth, call me. Not as a client, but as someone who understands what it means to rebuild after betrayal." She offered a small, sad smile. "My late husband, my real one, not Thatcher's fictional version, left me with many beautiful things, including the knowledge that life continues after devastation, sometimes in surprising ways." The following morning, Sloan sat across from Thatcher in a sterile interview room at Seattle Police Headquarters. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit, his usually impeccable appearance diminished by a night in custody. Yet his posture remained proud, his gaze direct. "You found me out," he said simply. "Impressive work." "Not impressive enough," she replied. "I lived with you for 6 years without seeing who you really were." A ghost of his familiar smile crossed his face. "That's not entirely fair. Parts of our life together were genuine." "Which parts? The $35 million in stolen money? The 6 women you murdered? Or just the lies you told me every day?" He leaned forward, his eyes intent. "I never lied about loving you, Sloan. Everything else. Yes. The money, the business trips, the connections, all fabricated. But not that." The declaration should have moved her, but Sloan found herself unmoved. Love doesn't plant bombs in homes. Love doesn't murder innocent women. "They weren't innocent," he countered, a flash of something dark crossing his features. "Rich widows playing at philanthropy while sitting on fortunes they never earned, taking credit for their husband's work, their husband's money." "Like Delphine?" His expression hardened. "Delphine was different, smarter, more suspicious. That's why I needed more elaborate preparations for her." A pause. "You weren't supposed to be involved. The case was a coincidence I couldn't have predicted." "Not coincidence," Sloan corrected. "Consequence. Eventually, every predator makes a mistake. My mistake wasn't targeting Delphine," he said quietly. "It was underestimating you." In that moment, looking into the eyes of the stranger she had married, Sloan realized she had received what she came for. Not closure or understanding, but confirmation. The man before her was exactly what the evidence suggested: calculating, remorseless, and utterly convinced of his own justifications. "Goodbye, Thatcher," she said, rising from her chair. "Sloan!" His voice stopped her at the door. "The money is still out there. Millions. More than you could earn in a lifetime of catching cheating spouses. I can tell you where to find it. We could still—" "Still what?" she interrupted, genuinely curious at what he might propose. "Start over. Somewhere new. Together." His eyes held hers, earnest and persuasive, the same expression that had convinced 5 women to trust him with their fortunes and their lives. "I meant what I said. I do love you." That was never part of the con. For a brief, disorienting moment, Sloan glimpsed the marriage as it might have been: the charming, attentive husband, the luxurious lifestyle, the comfortable security. All she would need to do was ignore the blood money that paid for it, the lives destroyed to build it. "I believe you," she said finally. "That's what makes you truly dangerous. You believe your own lies." She turned away from him for the last time. "Enjoy prison, Thatcher." 1 year later, Sloan stood in the airy offices of Ridley Morrow Security, overlooking Elliott Bay. The glass-walled conference room behind her buzzed with activity as her team, now 12 strong, prepared for their weekly strategy meeting. The firm specialized in protecting wealthy individuals, particularly women, from sophisticated financial predators. In the months following Thatcher's arrest and subsequent conviction on multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and first-degree murder, they had uncovered 7 additional cases bearing his signature methodology, stretching back nearly a decade. The Chicago client arrives at 2, Delphine announced, entering with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Sloane, a daily ritual that had evolved from professional courtesy to friendship to something deeper neither woman had yet fully defined. Her financial team is impressed with our preliminary assessment. Good. Sloane accepted the coffee gratefully. Did Grace finish the background check on the investment advisor? Complete this morning. Multiple red flags. Delphine's expression darkened momentarily. Another predator who underestimated his prey. They stood side by side, looking out at the water, comfortable in the brief silence between them. From tragedy had emerged purpose, not merely a successful business partnership, but a shared mission to protect others from experiencing similar devastation. The lawyer called again about the penthouse, Delphine mentioned, referring to the rebuilt luxury apartment that insurance had restored after Thatcher's explosive surprise. The sale is final next week. Sloane nodded, feeling nothing but relief at severing this last material connection to her former life. Perfect timing with the new place being ready. Her new home, a modest but elegant apartment overlooking a small neighborhood park, represented everything her life with Thatcher had not been. Authentic, earned through honest work, filled with items chosen for personal meaning rather than status or price tag. Torres called yesterday, she continued, sipping her coffee. They've connected Thatcher to a case in Toronto from 2012. Another wealthy widow. Another suspicious death. Will it affect his sentencing? No. 6 consecutive life terms is already effectively forever. Delphine's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. You saved lives, Sloane. Not just mine. Every woman he would have targeted in the future. We saved each other, Sloane corrected, thinking of how close she had come to being another casualty, not of Thatcher's violent schemes, but of his more insidious deception. The comfortable blindness she had cultivated to avoid questioning the source of her luxury had been its own form of slow death. Through the glass wall, she could see Grace signaling that the meeting was ready to begin. Around the conference table sat their team, mostly women, many of them survivors of financial or emotional predation themselves, now trained to recognize and combat the sophisticated methods used by modern con artists. As Sloane and Delphine moved to join them, Sloane reflected on the strange journey that had led her here. Her greatest case had indeed been unmasking the man who had shared her bed for 6 years. Her greatest reward had not been the $50,000 Delphine had paid her, but the authentic life she had built from the ashes of that devastating discovery. Ready? Delphine asked, pausing at the conference room door. Sloane squeezed her hand once, before releasing it to adopt her professional demeanor for the meeting. More than ready. Let's get to work. Together, they stepped forward into the future they had created, not despite Thatcher's betrayal, but because of what they had discovered about themselves while bringing him to justice. In the end, the greatest discovery hadn't been the elaborate fraud or the hidden millions, but the strength that emerged when facades crumbled and truth, however painful, was finally brought to light. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.